What is going on, you guys? MissedThePart here, back again with another really exciting video. If you guys are having a fantastic day as always. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about something that I personally would love a discussion. Like, it's crazy because, you know, we're in the 2020s now, and if you look at it, it's been like over 10 years since the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie, like over 10 years. And you know, I just thought I'd bring to light a video that I really wanted to make. You know, I saw some meme of like somebody's like, when you look at the 2010s and then you see like no Spider-Man movie and it just has some guy crying or whatever. I was just looking at that and I was like, you know, I gotta make a video on what if Spider-Man 4 did come out on May 4th, 2011. You know, what if it did come out? Now, I know a lot of fan fictions that I make, most of them aren't, you know, realistic, like in the actual world of things, and you know, some of them are. I think I've done like 2 of them that have been like, you know, like what if Andrew Garfield joined the MCU, and we kind of like take a look at the world and like what would have happened. And I think we're gonna do a little bit of mix towards that, and I do want to talk about like what actually I think would have went down, you know, if Spider-Man 4 was not canceled. And, you know, if Sam Raimi ended up making the script in time and, you know, there was no rushes or anything like that. Now, I think the way that this would have had to been done would have had to have been Spider-Man 3 would have had to have been really good, you know, in this timeline, in this weird alternate world, you know, that, you know, maybe it did happen in an alternate timeline. But I think, you know, you would have to have Spider-Man 3 would have had to have been a really good movie to really go forward in time, you know, with this trilogy. You know, you would have had it to somehow, you know, go over all those obstacles with, you know, like Sandman, Venom, and, you know, the fan backlash back then was pretty big on this movie because a lot of people thought it was rushed and it was all cluttered in, and a lot of people didn't really like the emo Parker, you know, bully Maguire, you know, people didn't really like that. And it's kind of like, you know, like when you look at it, you know, like you didn't like it. And personally for me, I love Spider-Man 3, but back then, you know, it was kind of like crazy because, you know, I really loved the symbiote storyline, and, you know, I watched the 90s symbiote storyline, so I was really digging it, and I was really excited for Spider-Man 4. And, you know, I think Sony ended up just losing a bit of hope there, where, you know, they had 2 successful films, like, you know, Spider-Man 2002 and Spider-Man 2, and then, you know, they have a bomb like Spider-Man 3, and then they just kind of ended it. So I think in an alternate reality, I think you would have had to have had, you know, Spider-Man 3 do really well, and maybe that is, you know, cutting Avi Arad out and just putting, like, you know, not having Venom in this movie, and maybe just focusing on, you know, like Sandman and maybe other villains. You know, I think that's what would have needed to be done to get on a path where Spider-Man 4 would have been really good. And I think Spider-Man 4 would have turned out just as good as, you know, Spider-Man 2 if this actually would have happened. You know, some of the storyboards looked really well done, you know, with Vulture. They had, you know, Mysterio. He was supposed to be like Bruce Campbell or something. I don't know if Bruce Campbell shot that down and if he said he wasn't going to be Mysterio or not, but that would have been a really interesting twist if he was Quentin Beck in that universe. And, you know, Spider-Man 4, I think, would have changed the course of history, as in, you know, like the MCU and going forward with superheroes in the 2010s, because, you know, you start off the 2010s with, you know, a successful movie, and then you announce Spider-Man 4 early in the 2010s, where you have, you know, Spider-Man 4 could become this big thing. And, you know, if it was really successful, I think Spider-Man 4 would have been that Iron Man movie back then that would have kicked off the MCU. But the MCU would have been a lot different because, you know, you would have already had Spider-Man, pretty much one of the biggest superheroes of all time, you know, going bigger. And, you know, I know how I talked about this before, you know, what if Tobey Maguire was in the MCU? And, you know, I just think that, you know, if Spider-Man 4 did happen, I think you would have actually had a really interesting Raimi-verse where, you know, you could have gotten characters like Carnage, and maybe you would have had, like, because I know a lot of people really wanted Jim Carrey to play Carnage. You know, there was a big rumor going around where a lot of people really wanted Jim Carrey to play Carnage, and I think that's something that I personally, for me, I would have loved to have seen. And, you know, he would have been a lot younger, and I could just see him going crazy, you know, in just Spider-Man 4 or Spider-Man 5, where, you know, like the symbiote gets destroyed in Spider-Man 3, but then after, you know, it does have a kind of like rebirth thing where, you know, we do see the Carnage symbiote come back, and, you know, like we would have like, you know, you would have like Spider-Man kind of get like PTSD a little bit, where, you know, like he would have like dreams about like Harry dying over and over again. And I think he would kind of get a bit obsessed with that, and, you know, I think he'd go a bit crazy over it, and, you know, I think he'd get like a lot of flashbacks, but it would have made the story look really good. And I think Spider-Man 4 would have kicked off even more Spider-Man movies. Like, I think it would have actually been, like, I don't know, but, like, I think we would have been up to, like, Spider-Man 7 with this whole trilogy, like, if it was really good. And, like, over time, people would then start to get bored of Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man because of how many there were. So a lot of people then would like want a reboot, like, because they'd be like, okay, you know, we've had enough of the Spider-Man, I think it's time for change. Like, we've had like 7 movies with Tobey Maguire, and then a lot of people would be thinking differently about it, you know, because of so many movies that we ended up having. You would have had tons of people just being like, can we get a reboot now, like, we're kind of sick of this. And like eventually, you know, they'd probably end up rebooting it in the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the Raimi universe. You know, it'd probably be called the Raimi universe, because if it started with that, you know, it would have been a lot different. And I think Sony's deal with Disney probably would have been different as well. And I think, you know, Disney in this timeline would most likely purchase the Spider-Man movie rights, considering how many characters Spider-Man has. He has over 900 characters. And I think, you know, purchasing that, they'd be making a ton of money, and then they could make the Spider-Verse with Tobey Maguire and kind of like bring him back, but have alternate Spider-Man in movies. And I think, you know, if Spider-Man 4 was not canceled, there would be a lot of changes. You know, the Spider-Man 4 video game would have came out, Spider-Man PS4 would not have happened, you know, we wouldn't have got Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man. You know, we wouldn't have got Spider-Man Homecoming. A lot of these movies would just not have happened, and the MCU would look really differently. And I just think that, you know, if Spider-Man 4 did happen, you know, I would have loved to have seen, like, what would have happened after. Like, they could have done so much stuff with, like, Hobgoblin and, you know, like, Spider-Man 5 and, like, what that would have looked like with potentially the Lizard. You know, some of these characters, like the Lizard, that would have been really cool. But I could see it being really well done. You know, they would have had tons of video games, you know, tons of different things, merchandise. And, you know, I think the hype train would have kind of died down after Spider-Man like 6 if it was continuing, and eventually, you know, a lot of people would want the reboot, and I think people would kind of get tired of it after, because, you know, so many movies, you can only do so many movies with an actor, and then it's kind of like, okay, this is getting a little bit out of hand. You know, with Tom Holland, it's a bit different because he's been, and, you know, some of these movies like Avengers Endgame and all this stuff. But I think, you know, having like Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man going forward, I think it just would have been a little bit different there. So anyways, what do you think about my thoughts on what if Spider-Man 4 was not canceled on May 4th, 2011? You know, what would have happened? Do you guys think that Disney would have bought, you know, the Spider-Man rights earlier? And do you guys think that, like, you know, we would have had a second kind of like trilogy with Tobey Maguire if this thing did come out, and if Spider-Man 3 was successful? But anyways, let me know in the comments down below. And if you guys did enjoy this video, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends can stay all up to date with the latest content. And do make sure you check out the website and the merch if you guys want to support the channel. But anyways, as always, peace out.